All right, guys, we have a special guest this week. We have Steph from 49Karats podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. Steph, you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on.
Well, first, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the invite. I have my channel, as you mentioned, 49Karats podcast. That's where I do audio and video. So on my YouTube, I do videos and try to keep the content going all throughout, like the off season. I had prospects on, and now that we're finally getting into the meat of the season, we're getting close to it at least. I've been at training camp and trying to get some reports out of there as well, seeing how the guys are doing. And then, once the season gets started, it's a wrap. There's tons of content every single day pretty much for this team. So that's pretty much what I do. Also have the Bully Ball podcast from the Gold Standard Network with Rob Stats and Jason Aponte. So I do okay.
More than okay, Steph. You're like one of the go-to 49ers creators. A lot of people love your stuff. I mean, we're fans, so.
I appreciate that. There's so many content creators, so many great content creators. So I guess to be considered among one of the better ones, or just for people to even tune into my stuff, I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you sure I'm up there? But okay, thanks.
Yeah, really quick. I think we'd like to know maybe some other people who are kind of getting into this content game, want to know a little bit of your background. Can I ask, what was kind of the origin of you becoming a 49ers fan? Where did that start?
Yeah, so I mean, that came from my brother, my older brother. I'm the youngest. I have three siblings, and I was always just kind of gravitated to my brother, and just I thought he was the coolest person ever growing up. So he was a big 49ers fan, into sports and everything. So out of all the sports that he was fans of, he's fans of all the Bay Area teams, but I think I gravitated more towards football. And I don't know if it was the fact that it's kind of hard to understand at first. Like if you're a first time viewer of it and, you're younger, you kind of have to sit down and kind of learn the rules. It's not something you can really just start watching and enjoy right away. Right. So I don't know if it was that just the process of getting to learn it over time that, made me like it more than say baseball. But yeah, I mean, 49ers were the team to like. And what's funny is I actually got more into the 49ers when they were bad. Cause I didn't really see any of the good teams. And I remember my brother and my dad talking about Steve Young and all that, but I wasn't into it then. So it really wasn't until Alex Smith was drafted, and how that went at the early stages of his career and all the coaching carousel that happened in those years. So I went through all that stuff, and that's really when I guess had a passion for the 49ers in some weird twisted way. Like who would want to become a fan of that team, right? But there were a few guys that I liked, like Gore and Staley, that I guess kept me around.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have a pretty similar background. So we started around the Alex Smith era, getting into it, really kind of digging in heavy, and yeah, there were some lulls in those years. And I remember
just a little. We're sick and twisted that we enjoyed that time. Not that I enjoyed it, but I watched. I watched religiously, and it's weird. It's weird to say that now, but I guess the 49ers, the way the fans call them each other and what the 49ers call their fans, faithful, right? So to have gone through that, I don't think anyone can say that we aren't faithful, right?
Definitely. And so I know for us, when we started up last year, it was okay, we're going to be talking about this anyway. Andrew is actually going to school for media, so he wanted to get something on his actual portfolio.
Yeah.
So that was the origin of this pod. This is how we spun it up. But can you tell us a little bit about why you got into the podcast game, how that started, just a little bit about that?
Honestly, I would have never considered to do it myself. So I started a very long time ago being active on Twitter and talking about the 49ers. And so I started the 49ers Hub Twitter account. I don't even remember when I created it. I suppose it says on the account, but so I did that for a few years, and it was just me running it. It was pretty much just like a fan account, right? Like that's what I wanted to do. It was fun to just talk about the 49ers on there, not attach my face to it. Like I try to be objective and all that. And then it became too much. Like we got a huge following, and it was too much to keep up with over time. So I stopped doing that. And I just did my own like solo, Twitter. And me tweeting about the 49ers kind of fell off a bit too. Like, it was more so just my personal Twitter. But there was a point in time where Javi, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Javi Vega. He was starting up a site. It was called 49ers Gold Mine or 49GM. You might have seen that on Twitter. But basically, he was, trying to put together a bunch of different, I guess you could say, up and coming like content creators, which at the time I wasn't even pursuing that, so it's kind of weird like that he approached me with that opportunity, saying that he'd think I'd be good at a podcast. Mind you, I'd never done a podcast before. I am an introvert. I feel like I'm not good at speaking sometimes. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it just because like I do love the 49ers, and I think it is cool for someone to believe in you and think that you could be good at that. And it could be fun, right? So maybe it's just my reentry into, getting into 49ers content, I guess. So yeah, I took him up on it, and I guess it's been a great experience for me since I've started. And I feel like I didn't think I was so good at it at first. I think I've improved over time, and I'm still trying to improve, but also I think it's allowed me to learn more and want to learn more about football instead of just having a baseline knowledge of it. It forces you to kind of dig a little deeper and have a deeper knowledge of not just the players, but the schemes and what certain things are called and all that. So I guess that's where I'm at now. But yeah, it was an interesting and I guess sort of unlikely re-entry into creating content.
Yeah, that's crazy that you'd had no podcast experience. You just jumped right in. And like, I wouldn't think from like all that you do that you're introvert, like you're going on TV and like talking about the Niners and you're flying out to camps doing all this stuff. And I think I just saw that you got back from like, it looked like an amazing vacation. Like, I don't think people see like all the things that you have to do that go into this. I know like we are constantly editing and trying to get videos out on time. So it's like, we're on topic and all these things. Like, how do you balance that work-life balance, like covering the NFL?
I try my best. Like I do have a job outside, the job that actually pays me outside of doing, podcasting. And so it's a very fine line, and it's a very, I guess, what is it, towing the tightrope or something like that, where you do have to have a balance because you don't want to jeopardize your actual job. I feel like I toe that line a bit, but to put out great content, and because I enjoy it, I don't make a whole lot of money out of the podcasting. Yeah, maybe I probably, if I tried a little bit harder or try to get sponsorships and things like that, maybe I could. But right now, like I really don't make that much. So it's more so like a passion for me to do it. But it is a whole lot of work. It's so much work. And yeah, that is a side that people see, because everyone thinks, oh, like I love the 49ers. It would be so much fun to just like talk about it, right? And then you realize, oh, like, wait, I have to do that too? Like, oh my God, that is a lot of work. And in order to grow, I got to do that too. Like, so it's this constant, wanting to grow as a podcast, but also, yeah, you do have to find that balance for sure. And I try to make it easy on myself as much as I can. I create my own thumbnails, but I have one specific Photoshop file for it that I just like, keep working on it. but it's a lot. It is a lot, and it's not for the faint of heart. You really got to love it. You really got to love it if you do it and you continue to do it, whether you're popular or you're not, whether you make money or you're not. You got to love it.
Yeah. And so as soon as we got like, you were like, yep, well, I'm going to go on the pod. I was hyped. I was like, if I'm going to ask one question, it's going to be this. When did you figure out that you were the third Bosa sibling?
I knew that question was coming at some point, as you started your question, but that was weird. I just thought it was funny, and I'd poke fun at the fact that Bosa was doing, team speeches. Like, who would have thought to put him in charge of team speeches? It's like, have you heard this guy talk?
Hey everyone. We earned ourselves another week in the tournament.
So I thought it was just funny to kind of just imagine what that would be like. And I made a video doing it, and I guess it was pretty funny and spot on, and people just liked this, so I kept doing it. So it's become a whole thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's awesome. For those who haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. It's pretty spot on. And with that, has anyone from the 49ers organization or even like Bosa himself reached out to you and been like, hey, pretty good?
It's so weird. So at first I was kind of curious, like, I wonder if the players have heard about this or have seen it and wonder what they think. One of my friends who I guess like knows a player said that they had seen it, but I didn't hear that from a first account. So I was just like, okay, cool. And then I was at the combine in Indy for that, and John Lynch was there, and me and Jay, we introduced ourselves to John Lynch just to, we're content creators and we want to shake some hands. So we shook his hand. He looked over at me and he knew exactly who I was. Like, I've never met this man in my life. He knew my face. He knew who I was. And I was like, what is happening? And Jay is like the Nick Bosa impression. I'm like, what? Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, there's no way. There's no way it got up all the way to, John Lynch. Because, like, if John Lynch has seen it, then I feel like they would have all seen it at that point. So, so Adam Peters was next to him. He was like, AP, this is the girl that does the Nick Bosa impression. And they had me do it on the spot. John Lynch filmed it and sent it to Bosa. He's like, I'm going to send this to Bosa. So, yeah, somewhere on John Lynch's phone is a video clip of me doing the Nick Bosa impersonation. Somewhere on Nick Bosa's phone is a clip of me doing the Nick Bosa impersonation. So it's crazy. I would have never thought it would have gained that much popularity. Like maybe on 49ers Twitter, but I did not think for a second that it would have reached like the actual organization. So that was pretty crazy.
But I mean, if it was going to be anyone, it was going to be John Lynch, because I mean, he's famously chronically online. Remember the accidental we left Jimmy on the tarmac.
That was not accidental. That was hilarious. That was hilarious. We know what you were doing at mass. What was it? Wasn't it like Christmas or something? Like,
yeah.
It was like Christmas mass. We know what you were doing.
It's like, I'm not on the phone, it was in my pocket. My family. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
With Bosa holding out, I was hoping maybe you get in touch with the Niners social media team and you go out there as Bosa or something.
So this is what I'm thinking. I was like thinking today, well, I really hope that Nick Bosa signs his extension soon, because then I'll get to see him in camp. Like, I'm only there until Saturday, and I leave after that Saturday practice. Time's a ticking, but if let's just say he is there and he signs autographs, I will stay till like after practice for him to look at me in his face, and he'll know exactly who I am. So I would try to get a picture, of course. Now, will the 49ers like actually, try to plan something? I don't know. But that would be cool too, I guess.
That would be awesome to go Bosa to Bosa with him.
Yes. I mean, at this point, I've already met John Lynch out of this. I got to dream big now, right? Like, yeah, I think at this point, my next goal is just to meet Bosa and do a video with him. We'll see.
It seems attainable now. I mean, you just got to be like, hey, I know John. Like, John, get me in the room.
Right. Yeah. We'll see.
I mean, speaking of training camp, I think we can get into some football topics now. Things are full swing. I know you attended camp. D was there yesterday.
Yeah, I was there.
Heard a lot of intensity coming from camp. A couple fights breaking out. You feeling like this super intense training camp is kind of a good thing, or is it a little scary with kind of a injury-prone team that's trying to make a deep playoff push? Like, you want them to pace themselves a little bit.
It's a little of both, and I think they got to strike that balance. I mean, you love to see that intensity and that competitive spirit, and I don't mind the fights. You know, I don't mind the fights, but you don't want it to get to a point where guys are at jeopardy of getting hurt. Like Clinton Farrell yesterday had a hit on Brock Purdy that was similar to the NFC Championship, play in which Purdy got hurt, right? So those are things you don't want to see. You also don't want to see. There was another report of like Jordan Mason, lowering his shoulder or lowering his helmet, running through guys, and it's like some of that is unnecessary. You know what I mean? So they got to find that balance between, yes, being competitive and playing hard, but also being smart and being good to each other and not hurting each other at the end of the day. So it does get a little, I don't want to say chippy, but it does get intense sometimes between both sides because they do really want to hit people, and the defense does. And yeah, it could lead to some of those injuries and those scary moments. But all in all, I'm not too worried about it. I think for the most part, I think it's good. But yeah, you can best believe that the coaches have some words for those players if they see some of those extracurricular hits after some plays.
Yeah, and I mean, yesterday it was like a couple of different fights. So it was the big one that broke out after the Elijah Mitchell hit, and then even Jawan Jennings and Hufanga got into it. Dre Greenlaw after the pick had to be separated from guys. So like, I think it's just one of those things where everyone's so amped up and ready to go. It's the first day of pads. Like, let's go ahead and get after it. And it is from both sides. But I think you see it a lot like boxing, where like one opponent comes out super emotional and they kind of just blow all their energy right off the bat. So I'm really just hoping that as we get a little bit more centered in this camp and throughout this preseason, we can kind of, hey, let's go ahead and go methodical with this.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx the team, but in the past, like them being so intense in training camp has led to, injuries, right? For some guys, and they go into preseason with some guys, being injured, or they go the first few weeks of practice with some of their guys being not 100%. So far, we haven't seen that, and I hope that continues. But yeah, I mean, that's a concern as well. But the one positive I think I could take from it is that the intensity right now is good because this team needs to feel that sense of urgency and that sense of urgency needs to carry into week one. You can't have a slow start to the season like you have had these last few years. You got to come out guns blazing. And, if you want a Super Bowl, don't mess around. And that starts week one. And it's starting now. It starts now really in training camp. So that's the positive that I take from it. I think that it means that they're engaged, they're interested in doing better and playing hard. And I think that's from example, right? I mean, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, even Christian McCaffrey, those are the kind of players on this team. And I'm sure there's other guys as well who they play hard. And it makes their teammates, you see that in practice and you're like, oh, well, let me turn up too then. So I think it's great for the team to have that.
Yeah. And people that are going to have to improve like at a pretty high rate, the right side of the O-line, do you have any concerns with Burford now without Brunskill there to rotate in, and Colton McKivitz really stepping up and being a full-time starter? Is there any concerns there on that right side of the field?
No, in fact, like I'm actually pretty encouraged by the offensive line going into this year. Instead of, last year when there were 3 new starters, there's a lot to gel, and there's a lot of chemistry that needs to be built when there's 3 new starters on a line. But they're being just 1 new starter this year, and that starter, Colton McKivitz, having already been with this team for a few years now, I'm encouraged by that because he's not new to the system. He's not new to these teammates. And so I think that'll help this unit get off to a quicker start than maybe we saw last year. And that cohesion, I think, should be there a lot sooner than we've seen in the past as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely not as concerned as D is with the offensive line. I'm feeling pretty good about like an Aaron Banks coming back, Burford, and then as long as Trent Williams stays healthy, like I mean, it's a heavy scheme-driven system for the offensive line. So it's not like we're asking McKivitz to go out there and take on the best defender like every single time. It's going to be a lot of we're going to put you guys in good position to run the ball. And I think he's going to be okay. But as far as blogging for Brock Purdy, how are you feeling about Brock Purdy coming back so soon from this injury, and kind of being handed the keys to the team? Like, are you confident that he's going to be good to go and he's going to be the guy?
Yeah, as far as being like so soon, I don't think it's too soon, right? Because he's been fully cleared. So I think we could feel good about that. And also, I think the fact that they're staying within the planned timeline, he's not full go as far as the timeline goes, right? He's still 2 days on, 1 day off. So they're adhering to that. I think that's good. It means they're not necessarily rushing him back, but they are still staying within the means of what he can do. This is great. It's best case scenario for this team that he can practice now in training camp and get up to speed again with these guys. And it's huge. I mean, we did see some rust, to start training camp with Brock, and that's kind of to be expected. The valuable part of him being out there now is that he has the chance to shake off that rust before week 1. Otherwise, we might get that slow start, at the start of the season. So I'm expecting him to, yes, be the starter in week 1, but also he should be by that time on the same page as these guys and, hopefully not miss a beat. Now, as far as him, being handed the keys to the franchise right now, and being the week 1 starter, supposedly, Kyle hasn't actually said that yet, but I think, we all know he has said it without having to say it, and this team has said it. So, I think that's deserved based on what he did last year. And I think John Lynch said it at some point this offseason that what Brock Purdy has done kind of outweighs anything that, some of the other guys would be able to do in training camp and OTAs and whatnot, right? Because what Brock Purdy did was in games, and it wasn't just any games. It was, some playoff games and some tough games at the end of the year, right? So I think that means something, and it holds a lot of weight. And so I think it made sense always for them to say he was the leader of the clubhouse. And also, if anything, like it could set a fire under a guy like Lance. And when you bring Darnold in, it's like you set that bar. Okay, like I got to be this good if I want to be the starter on this team. So I think it's great for the team, and I think Brock deserves it. So. Based on what we've heard from camp and what I've seen, I don't think there's any reason to believe that he won't be the starting quarterback. And I think it's deserved. I don't think he should be in a competition with anyone based on what I've seen.
Yeah. And just to kind of like follow up on that, Trey Lance has been building momentum throughout the last couple of days. He's had a couple of good practices. Do you see him at any point stepping in to being a starter, or do you think a year from now he's going to be moved on from the team?
I would like to see Trey Lance stay on the team, just based on some of the injuries that happened last year. I mean, you just never know. You can't really assume, I guess, at this point that your starter is going to be healthy, much less a starter who's coming off an injury, right? So I think that I can't really say if Lance is going to have an opportunity to start in the season. That would mean a couple of things, like either Brock Purdy's not playing very well, and he would have to really stink it up, I think, for them to consider it, or we see, Purdy get hurt, right? So I think those are the, situations in which we can potentially see Lance in the season. But also at this point, we don't know who's going to even be the backup, right? Is it going to be Darnold or is it going to be Lance? Or in some weird, messed up reality, could it be Brandon Allen? So, we just don't know right now. And I think unless, Lance is the backup, maybe there's a chance that we see him in the season, but we just don't know. But I think he should stay on this team. I feel like he's proved at least that much to this point.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a proponent of maybe Trey Lance is the right quarterback, but this was just the wrong team, the wrong timing. It just didn't line up for what the San Francisco 49ers needed at this time. It's a bunch of vets that were ready to get after it, and they didn't want to hey, we're going to take some licks and learn some lessons. They were let's get after it.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't make sense a whole lot from the standpoint of where they were and where Trey Lance was and needing to develop him, and there being a lack of patience for that. I don't know if they thought that he was maybe further along than he actually was. I mean, certainly the mechanics and all that was an issue. And looking at, if you compare what his throwing motion looked like then to what it is now, then you can really see oh, wow, that was a pretty big issue that he needed to fix. But maybe, I don't know, did they just not know that it was that bad? I kind of find that hard to believe too, that it seems like there's just a lot of maybe some miscalculations on their part as far as, what Trey Lance was coming out. And so that plus not having the time or the patience to develop him. But that being said, I mean, last year he was the starter. He was kind of handed, the keys to the franchise then, and just to see what he can do and go through those bumps with him. And he ended up getting hurt. So it's more so just unlucky than unfair for him and the team. But in the meantime, they've found Brock Purdy. They stumbled upon Brock Purdy, and he ended up being really, really good. So I understand it from the team standpoint. Yeah, just very unfortunate for Lance that he can't have that opportunity to get those reps to grow, because I think it would serve him right to get more snaps, because I think he's also a rhythm guy. The more snaps he gets, he kind of gets in a groove. But how is he going to get in a groove if he doesn't get those opportunities, right? He's not going to get those opportunities as long as Brock Purdy's out there. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. But I think the 49ers should stick around for him and just see what he could be. I know how much they invested in him, and I guess you could say it's a waste for him to be a backup, but I think it would also be a waste if they just got rid of him now, right? It just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and speaking on that, where he came into a weird situation, I also think it contributed that Kyle is kind of a weird guy, where if he likes a quarterback, that's going to be his guy, and he's going to want to ride with that guy. The Nick Mullins and Beathards of the world are he's going to ride or die for those kind of guys. Even now you're saying it's weird that Brandon Allen is getting so much playtime, and it's looking like more and more, I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Allen is our backup just because Kyle loves the guy. And even Brock Purdy making the roster in the first place, like he was the 4th quarterback on the roster, but because Kyle loved him, he cut Nate Sudfeld, who they just paid, and they kept Brock. And I don't know, it seems kind of a little bit of a disconnect for a second in the Niners where they were like, we need to go for this Josh Allen generational type talent over someone who Kyle is really going to want to work with and ride for.
Yeah, I think there's also a bit of, Kyle Shanahan going with what's comfortable to him. And, I almost got the sense that Trey Lance and calling plays for Trey Lance, he was uncomfortable with that. It kind of felt like at times. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Trey Lance was uncomfortable with, Kyle's offense. Maybe it was a little of both, right? But, I think that is somewhat part of it because Purdy, Jimmy Garoppolo, I think those are quarterbacks who kind of play the way that, Kyle Shanahan likes, right? And by that, I mean, they're really good at short intermediate. They can move the ball well. They can process well. They do the foundational things well. And I think that those things mean a lot to Kyle. And I was just talking about this earlier that, I think Trey Lance could make the tough throws look easy, but he has a hard time with the easy throws, the layup throws at times. And I think that's been an issue too. Like, how is Kyle Shanahan supposed to trust you in his offense, an offense that is the foundation of it is those short intermediate, those layup throws, right? If you can't hit those consistently, like how are you supposed to get, Kyle's trust, right? So I think that's the hurdle that Lance kind of needs to get over. And, I think he's trying in this training camp, but that's, what we're going to have to see at some point.
Yeah. And just to kind of switch things over, because we've been talking about the offense a lot, let's switch over to the defensive side. Sneaky, there's a lot of change going on. So lose Ward, D'Amico, Aziz, you draft Brown, Hargraves comes over. How are you feeling about the defense? What are you expecting? Is it going to be another top tier defensive showing this season? Are we thinking a little bit of some learning curves here and there?
Yeah, I think this defense is going to be great. I think it's going to be lights out. And I think because one of the things that you could have looked at this defense last year and been like, oh, that could be a little bit better. It was always the secondary. And now we have Steve Wilkes, who, that's what he's known most for, coaching DBs, right? And that's what I've seen him focus on most, like in training camp. And I've seen reports too that he's very hands-on with DBs. He works almost exclusively with the DBs as he's been out there. And so I think that's great. And I think that group of guys is probably going to take another step this year, which can only mean good things for the rest of the defense, because we already know the linebackers are, one of the top duos in Fred, or probably the best duo in Fred and Greenlaw in the league, right? And then you have the defensive line, who as of right now doesn't even have Nick Bosa out there, and they're still making some plays. That being said, like maybe I want to see a little bit more out of the depth, but I think Drake Jackson is looking good. Javon Hargraves looking good. Kinlaw's even looking good, right? So if Kinlaw can look good, I mean, I think that could mean good things for this team, and you'll take anything that he'll give you, right? Even as a rotational piece. So yeah, I think this defense is going to be, really dangerous. I think we're going to see a lot more blitzes. We're going to see a lot of more 3 safety looks. So maybe we see more Jair Brown, getting some playing time too. So I'm really excited about this group, and I think there's a potential that they could be better than they were last year.
Yeah, and with the aggressiveness of Steve Wilkes and Deshaun Goldson now working with the team, how many players do you expect Ufunga to knock out in a game?
How many flags will he have this year? Well, Greenlaw too. I'm like, shoot, those guys always just flying to the ball. But I think it's going to be great for Hufanga because he really has a nose for the ball already. And so I think, to a certain extent, you don't really want him to get a bunch of flags or anything, but just to have that nose for the ball and to, I guess, set the expectation of, welcome to playing the 49ers. Like, this is how we're going to do you. So I think it really just sets the stage for any opponent to kind of, and put them on notice to, what they're going to have to endure for a whole 60 minutes with this team.
Definitely. And just switching gears again here to kind of more broader topic around the league. I don't know if you saw Jonathan Taylor requesting a trade, going through a whole drama with the Colts organization. Do you have any general thoughts on this owners versus running back pay gap situation?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I've seen some of the things that, Jim Irsay has been saying on Twitter, and it's like, wow, dude, do you even think about, before you tweet? But so that's unfortunate. But at the same time, like, I feel like he's just saying what I think a lot of GMs and a lot of execs, like, that's probably the way that they think about the position, right? And they have shown us that in some of these negotiations when it comes down time to extend some of these running backs. And I think part of it has to do with the running back position is such a tough position because there's a lot of wear and tear on running backs. And so by the time they get to that time where they're going to extend, it's like, ooh, like, do we really want to invest that much money? Because running backs don't really last in the league like they used to. So while they put a great 4 years on tape, I think the pause from teams is that you can't say for sure whether that guy is still going to be available for that second, contract. How is this contract going to look after the fact? So I get it from the business standpoint to an extent. But I do obviously still feel like there's a big disparity between, what they should be getting and what they're getting now. So I think, something's got to give at some point. That being said, it is tough because this league is a league where someone's always ready to take your place. So for some of these running backs, if they hold out, there's always going to be a running back who's waiting for their opportunity. I mean, we saw the same thing happen with Le'Veon Bell, right? He held out and, he was an afterthought once that season got started and once it got going. And so it's tough for sure because, again, it's almost like when a union is on strike, there's always going to be someone who's going to be willing to take cents or however much they get paid. I forget what it's called. There's like a name for it.
Scab.
A scab. There's always going to be a scab who's willing to take that money, right? And will be happy to take your job in the interim. So that's kind of how it is in the NFL too, right? And so it's like kind of a nasty business in that way. But yeah, I think hopefully we see better contracts for running backs in the future.
Yeah, I mean, look at Saquon Barkley. Like, exactly. They have that Zoom call, and then he turns around and is like, "Yo, it does suck, but I'm just gonna take what I can."
Yeah, I mean, that seemed pretty crazy to me, but at the same time, it's like I wonder if there's any thought in his mind, like, well, what if someone does take my job, right? And what if, like, I hold out for a whole season, and then what? There's so much, I guess, like, built into the CBA that makes it hard for players to hold out too, where, they're now losing out a bit if they do, and it hurts them in the long run. So yeah, it's tough. It's a nasty business. Just in general, like not even just for running backs, but that's why, I do always encourage players to get what they can while they can, right? Because NFL careers are short and much more for running backs. So I have some empathy for them for sure.
Yeah, it felt like for a second there, Saquon was going to be the like go-to guy of like, I'm going to hold out and we're going to reset this running back market. We're going to stand together. And then after that Zoom meeting he signed, I mean, maybe Jonathan Taylor can be that guy. If anyone's set up to kind of hold out and really put pressure on a team, their backup running back immediately gets hurt right after he's like requesting a trade. So I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but if there's anyone right now who's best set up, could be Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quietly thinking, like, thank God, like CMC, was traded, and like, we're not at a point where we have to extend him, because I think with all this conversation going on, he'd probably be asking for a lot too, and he would deserve it, right? So, yeah, it's definitely a tough topic. But yeah, I hope there's more fairness for running backs going forward.
Yeah, and so just looking at the league, and there's a couple Kyle guys out there, and Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, D'Amico Ryan. Who do you think has the most successful season out of those three guys?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like what Saleh's doing in New York. It's impressive. But that being said, like, they're in such a tough division. I mean, the Dolphins are in that division as well. So, man, they got a team, they got a squad, and their defense is good. So I'm rooting for them. I kind of soured on Aaron Rodgers a bit. I'm just like tired of him. But the team in general, and I root for Robert Saleh. I think they could be good this year. So I'm gonna say the Jets. But don't sleep on the Dolphins, man. I mean, they're still going to be good too.
I mean, I think there's a world where the Texans make the playoffs this year with their division not the best.
They could. I think they're probably at least another year or two away. But I really liked some of the moves they made this offseason, some of the players they drafted. Obviously, I love D'Amico Ryans too. So I think they're set up really well to, make it in the playoffs pretty soon.
Yeah, and with that, the Niners, they seem to keep finding great talent in their homegrown position players and coordinators. At the end of the day, like, could the Shanahan tree become one of the most impressive coaching lineages, you think?
Now, I'm not one to really like study coaches like that, because I know there's been a long line of really iconic, coaches to be in the NFL, and like their coaching trees and all that. I mean, even Walsh had a pretty large coaching tree, and so like, I don't know if I can answer that without really knowing too much of all the history of all the different guys, but it's definitely growing rapidly in the NFL. The Shanahan tree is. And so as long as they continue winning in their respective new teams, like, yes, they're going to keep getting opportunities. Their assistants are going to keep getting opportunities, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on how they do on those teams. But so far, I think they've all have been doing a pretty decent job, right? So, yeah, I think there's an opportunity, or there's a chance that we see it being one of the more successful coaching trees.
Yeah, especially with the way the league's going. It's looking good for the 49ers and that staff. I think last question we have, I mean, thank you for being on. Final quick question. What are you most looking forward to this coming season?
A Super Bowl. I hope that we see a Super Bowl. I think we can all kind of set our watch to the 49ers making the playoffs, as long as they're healthy. And that's great. I've really enjoyed, seeing that these last few years. It's always a great ride every single season, but I hate ending the season on a loss and thinking about that and the entire off season. That's kind of what ruins your thoughts on the 49ers for a few months after it happens, right? So I want to end the season on a win, and the only way you're going to do that is with the Super Bowl. And they've been so close this whole time that they're due for one, and they need one. And there's a sense of urgency that right now is probably the best chance you're going to have, right? So that's what I'm looking forward to, a Super Bowl. And yeah, I think I will be pretty disappointed if we get anything less than that.
Wow. I mean, it's strong. There's 32 teams in the NFL, only one Super Bowl winner, but
Yeah,
I get where you're coming from. It just to put the cherry on top of like what Kyle Shanahan and this 49er organization has done. I think it'd be awesome. And I think you're right. This is the year. I think the team knows it and they feel it. And that's why it is so intense. And that's why they're really pushing for it. And so, especially last year, to have such a bitter loss where you just didn't really have a dog in the fight, man.
I mean, I guess that one especially was pretty bad just because there was no chance. But they've all been bitter.
Yeah, we can go through some of the greatest L's, but yeah,
like, man. Now we're all
Let's stay
sad.
positive. Let's stay positive.
It's going to be a dub this year.
Yes, let's
All
go.
right. Steph, thank you so much. Make sure we're going to put all your links in the description. Make sure you guys go subscribe, watch all of Steph's stuff. She does amazing work. And go ahead and let them know what you're working on, where they can find you. Go ahead, whatever you want to tell them.
Yeah. First, thank you guys for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun. And you guys can find me on all main social media networks at Steph49K, same username on all the platforms. So YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, if you still use that. Steph49K. And I appreciate all the love. The podcast is 49Karats, and I'm also on the Bully Ball podcast for Gold Standard Network. That's pretty much my docket for the year.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate
We really
it, guys.
appreciate it.